all the time, never to be afraid of anyone or anything. And I want to thank all those across Dominica who have been giving us the support for the past months. Thank you so much for standing in solidarity with us, for recognizing our voices, and for giving us the opportunity to represent and really allow others to hear us. Thank you so much for that. I want to recognize Mr. Afe Atimate, who has done tremendous work in the area of environment. And he's here this evening, and I want to thank him for his presence. I want to thank the members of WAVE. I want to thank all the other persons who have been advocating for protecting the environment. You all are doing a marvelous job. And when you protect the environment, you also, I would say, support indigenous voices. So thank you all so much. And I do hope that the event here this evening will really open up our eyes, really empower us to continue to appreciate our environment, because if we do not care for it when it's gone, we are going to face the consequences. Welcome to the Kalinago territory. Welcome to the Barana Ote. And I do wish each and every one of you a pleasant evening.
Thank you so very much. We'll now ask Mr. Gerard Langley, the shaman, to come and just share a blessing with us.
Okay, Mabrika. Boiti Ariabo, Boiti Somoto. Okay, so as a Kalinago, I doesn't really like at the colonial setting when I'm going to do a prayer. I would like you to stand up and just form a big circle so I could do something indigenous, something like my Kalinago ancestors, as it was done in the past. Just leave your seats to form a big circle, right? Everything was done in circles. I heard. Oriyatamuru Opiparurapa Verakubita Mishan Oriyatamuru Opiparurapa Verakubita Mishan Tawanatamuru Aike Isandurikon Tawanatamuru Aide Isandumikon Suryatamuru Opiparurapa Verakubita Nisan Tawanatamuru Aide Isandumikon Tawanatamuru Aide Isandumikon Oi Shiri Tamushia Dayari Oi Shiri Omansani Anagoni Oi Shiri Rubai Kalina Gulumankani and Ragone, Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit of Musia Dayali. O great Spirit of our forefathers. O great Spirit, give us Kalinagos the strength, O great Spirit, to protect our beautiful island, Uaitu Kubuli, O great Spirit. O great and mighty Spirit, our forefathers have fought to defend this beautiful island for over 200 years, O great Spirit. O great and mighty Spirit, we ask you to give us the strength and the courage, O great and mighty Tamushi Adayali Sheri, O great Spirit. Bring back that warrior spirit in us, O great Sheri. And give us the strength and the knowledge and the wisdom of our forefathers to stand up, O great Spirit, and to defend this beautiful island, O great and mighty Spirit, the Sheri Adayali Tamushi, O great Sheri. Sololia Tamuru, Pipa Rolapa, Wera Kubita Michan. Tawana Tamuru, Aige, Hitando Mikon. Oh, Ishiri Tamusha Dayali, Ehura, Ahakatu. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening to everyone. Welcome again. My name is Jerry, that's what you already need to know. So because we want to be all inclusive in terms of everything we're doing, spiritual, everything else, and also to a big part of what we're going to be doing here is a spiritual awakening. And later on, we will explain, or we will say why this is the case. I really don't think we could have chosen a better spot to have planted this seed here this evening than the Baranawuti. I'm sure a lot of you all are able to hear the sounds of the ocean, the energy from that, but yet still calm. And so we're going to have one other song, which, I will encourage everyone to sort of, if you want, close your eyes and just listen to all the songs, also the music. And from there, we will do the presentations, okay? Thank you.
You will walk through a night so long, you forgot the sound of your own breath. You ever feel yeah, I've been there too. But every time I reach the end of myself, the shepherd finds me again, and he walks me home. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He gives me peace this world just can't flaunt. He lays me down by the water still, restores my soul, bends my will.
Who holds your hand, child?
My shepherd true.
Who keeps you steady?
When the storm comes through,
When the road gets dark,
I still sing praise.
He's my comfort.
He's my peace in thee.
Shadow day.
He restoreth my soul when I'm low and weak. Put strength in my bones and truth in my speech. He leads me through valleys and I don't lose sight. For the shepherd walks with me every night. I walk through the valley.
I won't be afraid.
His rod and staff,
They light my way.
I'll stand in the shadow
Of the Holy
His love still sings. Oh, he anoints my head, my cup runs over. Mercy follows me forevermore. Though enemies whisper, though fears may rise, His grace is my armor, His truth my pride. Who stands with you? The mighty one who fights your battle. When my knees grow weak, He helps me stand. I'm covered by His mercy, held in His hand. Yeah. Held in His hand. Even when I can't see the light, I still know the sound of His voice. It's the whisper through the rain, the calm through the storm, the peace that wraps me when I'm undone. He walks with me, and the valley won't break. What grace has. When the darkness calls, I still understand. He's my shepherd, my peace, my breath, my song. And I'll follow His voice till the night is gone. Follow it.
Thank you so much. I feel like this has really set the stage and the mood for us to really be able to absorb everything that we are about to hear. So to start us off, we are going to have Mr. Athi Mata come up here, and I'm sure he doesn't need an introduction, but I will do it anyway. So Atherton Athi Mata was born in the 1960s in Dominica and educated at St. Mary's Academy in Roseau. He pursued higher education at Cornell University, earning a degree in agricultural science, also known as agronomy, and was deeply influenced by ideas of social justice, equality, and agrarian reform. Upon returning to Dominica, Athi worked as manager of the Casa Bruce estate, where in the early 1970s he led a worker strike that catalyzed the formation of the Casa Bruce Farmers Cooperative. As a leader within Dominica Farmers Union, he organized farmers' solidarity with students and trade unions, contributing to the mass protests in May 29, 1979, that led to the collapse of Patrick John's government. Martin briefly served as caretaker minister for agriculture prior to the 1980s election and continued his commitment to sustainable farming and environmental stewardship. In 1998, he was awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize, and in 2022, he was named TDN Media's Man of the Year for decades of service. Throughout his career, his nationalized environmental concerns early positioned Dominica as a leader in Caribbean conservation policy. In recent years, Mr. Martin has emphasized the importance of promoting Dominican cultural identity. He continues to lead communities, drawing attention to environmental degradation, the impacts of river projects, and civic issues, supported by a broad coalition of citizens. Let's put our hands together for the amazing Mr. Athi Mata.
Thank you so much, Les Lassa. I am absolutely and completely overwhelmed. I am experiencing some feelings and some changes in my body, listening to the shaman, and just realizing how historic this gathering is. We often take these moments casually, trying to be cool, not letting our emotions come to the surface, to let it register that this is un momento especial in Spanish, a special moment to be treasured, to be listened to, because in every special moment, there are fresh messages Sometimes messages that you heard before, but now they're going to be presented differently. And I say to the chief, I haven't felt so humbled in a long, long time as I feel now to be. I almost feel like I'm in the presence of some supernatural kind of grouping. And I want to thank Kalinago for holding on to that spirit which has kept you going for thousands of years. Unfortunately, the rest of us have lost most of that spirit. And part of the reason is that in what was called education, whether it be religious or other education, we were never encouraged to be curious about what we were being told. We were encouraged to be accepting. In fact, you got rewarded for repeating what you were told, not for asking, but why is it so? Is there another way? So many of us who grew up and were raised in a church, in my case, the Catholic Church, we never ever understood Scripture and the messages therein. And it was to our detriment, because it meant that we were missing a learning moment which could have driven us to a point where today we wouldn't have to be fighting to stop the desecration. We would be fighting simply to celebrate our naturalness. Just let me connect some dots, because these are the things, when I dig deep into my soul, like I just did listening to the shaman, I can tell you why I am how I am. There's this book, the Holy Book for Christians, called the Bible. And there are such powerful messages of life in that we have never been encouraged to be curious enough to understand them, and even less so to apply them. And let me share something with you. I'm going to call the names of a few places mentioned in that book. And there's a commonality in all of these things that connects dots, which I draw on to strengthen the struggle to save places like Dominica. But this is not the only place that needs saving. Place one is the Garden of Eden. A place where so many things began. The garden captured the world. The River Jordan, from a garden to a river. The Red Sea, a sea, an ocean. Another garden, the Garden of Gethsemane. Then a hill, the hill of Calvary. It's beginning to sound like somebody is describing Dominica. Then a cave inside of a mountain. My dear friends, the most powerful messages in one's life are not shouted. They're murmured, they're whispered. They come to you quietly in a moment of reverence. And for me, as I try to explain to myself, why am I so fixated and excited and focused on protecting things natural? Gardens, rivers, mountains, seas, hills. That was all part of my early years education at SMA. My dear mother wanted me to be a priest, and I was going to be a priest. I probably would have made a damn good priest too. But something called ladies intervened in my journey towards priesthood. Yeah, that's part of the naturalness of Dominica too. Yeah. And I say this not to distract you from the purpose of this gathering, but to ask you to please take a moment and dig deep into your soul, into yourself, and ask, why is today important to me? Why is it important to my children, my grandchildren, to my father, my grandfather? Why is it important? And you will get the answer. It's because you are important. And I said to anybody who's setting themselves off on a journey to save anything, a tree, a turtle, a dolphin, a whale, soil, a river, do not begin that journey unless you are prepared to take it to its end. Unless you're prepared literally to give yourself, your life, for making something good happen. Don't start talking about saving a forest if you're not prepared to die for that forest. Because that forest is part of you. And the superficiality and the frivolity which people refer to these natural systems belies their importance. And I suggest two things, therefore. Dig deep in yourself and find out why the mangling of a forest bothers you, why the desecration of a river bothers you. Find out why. Because in the answer to that question, why, you'll find the strength to say, and I am going to do something about it, and I will not stop until what we set out to do is done. There are going to be a lot of distractions and challenges along the way. Right now, some of you are distracted by the shirt I'm wearing. Why are you wearing that shirt? Focus, focus, focus. I'm losing my vision completely in both eyes, but I have vision in 10 fingers. It gets a little sometimes embarrassing because I have to see you, I have to touch you. But you see, that's the beauty of natural systems, of which we are a part. And I think indigenous peoples have for centuries accepted that they are not here to dominate nature because they are part of nature. That simple truth is what gives them the staying power over centuries to make a living here in Dominica without destroying it. And yet we come, and after 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, we destroy. In the name of what? So please, I have nothing more than this to say to you today. dig deep, find the reason for your position on things natural. It's not political, it's not even scientific, it's total, it's you. When you find the answer to that question as to why, you can commit. Do not commit if you're not ready, but you'll only become a distraction to the movement, and that's not good. And be aware that this work of saving the earth is eternal. When you say the prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, what are you saying? Is there something better to happen with the earth? Yes. How is it to happen? We, the people of earth, who benefit from its oxygen, its water, its minerals, we are the ones responsible for making that happen and for preventing the destruction of the earth's capacity to support life, our life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. I feel like I hope we were all thinking about how we can commit, because I know I definitely was. And though I'm not based here in Dominica, I'm brainstorming all the different ways that I can commit to the nature island, to whatever in your heart is speaking to you. So we will jump right into our first presentation. As I stated earlier, there will be a short question and answer period after our presenters. So welcome to the stage, Gary and Janelle. So Gary Auguste is a Kalinago conservation biologist from the village of Tuna, Concord. He earned both his bachelor's and master's degree in biology from the University of the West Indies, Cape Hill, Barbados. An aspiring ornithologist, a bird expert, and researcher, his work centers on biodiversity conservation. He's an active leader in several youth, environmental, and climate justice movements at both local and international levels, and a strong advocate for nature conservation and education. He is also passionate about storytelling and hopes to further his interest through film as a tool for education and advocacy. Knowledge is key, and we all have a right to it, so stay curious. And I'm sure we have all seen the video that has been circulating, the 2 videos that Gary made that were very, very well researched and well put together. So, round of applause. And we also have Janelle Brisbane, is an ecologist, researcher, and environmental advocate working to protect Waitikubuli's biodiversity and communities. She's the founder of Wild Dominica, a local organization focused on community-led conservation, education, and research. She is currently pursuing her PhD in ecology at the University des Antilles, where her research examines how invasive species are affecting native wildlife. Janelle works closely with government agencies, communities, and regional partners across the Eastern Caribbean, and is a strong voice for science-based decision-making, environmental justice, and the inclusion of Indigenous and local knowledge in land and natural resource management. Let's put our hands together for Janelle.
Can you hear me? Okay, all right. Hello, all right, all right. All right, good night, everybody. Good night. Okay, just making sure it's correct. All right, good night, everybody, and welcome to the Kalinago Barana Ute, and welcome to this important event. Tonight, we're going to do a presentation on an important situation that is currently going on right now in Dominica. Those of you who would have seen the videos I posted and all the feedback that's been getting on social media. Janelle and I are going to present on our investigation we've been doing over the past couple months, because online you see a lot of opinions, a lot of feedback, but tonight we're here to present to you on factual information that we have gathered. So let's start. Thank you. So we each got our short introduction, but Janelle and I are ecologists. We are educators by practice. We are both Dominican born, and we enjoy sharing knowledge. It's just, okay. We just have to wait for the knowledge to share. Video. Hello? Okay, you could just scroll down. All right, so tonight's theme is protecting Dominica's land, rivers, and people. All three of these factors are important to understanding the situation. The foreground for the land text is actually the Concord Valley, we could call it the Pegua Valley, and we see on the top of lands there's a brown scar on the mountain. That is Dewash. And a little below, we see another brown patch that is close to Concord, that is actually a dump site where the topsoil is being dumped. So it's a very real picture, just take a couple days ago on the Hotspot Bridge. The middle picture is the Concord River. This is not after heavy rainfall, this is just soil runoff that has dirtied the river, polluted the waters of the Concord Valley. Okay, thank you, Jerry. And the other important factor is people. We are all a part of this important ecosystem of Dominica, the nature isle of the Caribbean, and without the people, we would not have the country that we have today, the country that we should be proud of. And the people have not been given the proper information or transparency that we deserve. So we're here to present on that today. Okay. So location is key to understanding what is going on. So we all should know where Dewash is by now. The yellow box indicates where it is, and we made a proper map to understand everything that's going on. The key things to understand is where the national protected parks are. So the two dark greens is the Northern Forest Reserve and then the Central Forest Reserve below. The yellow line signifies the river, and all the red dots are the residential homes of the valley. And the purple patch is the Kalinago territory. The yellow is the proposed area for the mine, for the mine proposed to help build the international airport. As you can see, it is sandwiched between the Northern Forest Reserve and the Pegua River, which is directly above a community. Next.
Okay, so before we get into what our recent findings are, we just wanted to give some background context because there's a lot of discussion about copper, and you will hear more about that in the valley in the next presentation. But why people think it's this way is because of historical context. So in the 60s and 70s, they did a mineral investigation in Dominica to see what is in this island, right? Copper, lead, gold, bauxite, a bunch of different things, but they did it throughout the Caribbean. And as you can see in this US Geological Survey record, for copper, when they registered copper, they spoke about Dewash having the highest potential for copper in Dominica. And that is why in the 90s, you had a mining company come to Dominica with interest to mine for copper and gold. It is because of these historical geosites and records. We won't get too much into it, but Gary's first video was actually reviewing this historical context. And lo and behold, after Gary posted this video reviewing the historical context of the site of what Dewash means in terms of minerals for Dominica, and his video got over or nearly 100,000 views, that's when the community started getting meetings. So here today, we are going to present you with what was presented to us at the community meetings and what we have found on the ground.
Right. So as Janelle said, after that video went viral, that's when we really started to see community meetings. Because before that, there was only one-on-one house-to-house meetings by the representative of the developers. And so we created this timeline to show you guys all what we found out between those meetings, because there's 4 meetings, 2 in Concord and 2 in Maricot. And what we understand is that the land was handed over in April 2025, and we really started noticing earth movements in July, August. Initially, we thought maybe someone was building their garden there because that was an agricultural plot, but soon to find out we see huge trucks and excavators and realize this is much bigger than just a regular garden. This is something major. And so we started to see pollution in the water in August, September. In September, the Carnegie Council visited the site, and that's when they made a post on Facebook saying that this should stop, that this project should not continue, and it didn't really pick up as much as we would have hoped, because not a lot of people were aware of the situation that was going on. In November, once I started doing some background checking on is there anything special about this valley? Why dig in there particularly? So I did my little research and I found that publication in 2007, and I made the first video. So that was in November. I later made a follow-up video based on the information we got in the first 2 meetings. And from that, the councils and also other members from the communities have been trying to reach out to the division, the minister, asking for answers, because it wasn't only us. Everybody's confused what's going on. Tourism is confused what's going on. Taxi drivers asking me what's going on, what happened into the valley, because I can't bring people to the river anymore. It's a mess. My boss is getting dirty. And that leads us to then there was a temporary halt in the Wash in December 2025. And we believe it was all thanks to the pressure online, because everybody was talking about it. Every feed every time I scroll, I see it. I don't know if it's just my feed, but people are talking out on the radio, people are sharing it, and people are asking questions like, what's going on? And so the Prime Minister gave a temporary halt. And after the halt, they continue to have radio shows, social media campaign, and people are coming out right now to express their concerns, which brings us to tonight, because we believe that education is key, education is powerful, and everybody has a right to education, and everybody has a right to their rivers, and everybody has a right to clean water. So we're here to educate everybody tonight, and welcome all your questions.
Yeah, okay, so what we learned from these community meetings is that they are currently in what they call the testing phase, and that the full operation of this project is going to start in January 2026. So that doesn't leave us with much time to be able to figure out what's going on, get the information before the whole mountain is blasted to smithereens. So what we are calling for at this present time is a permanent halt, and we are going to further explain why we want a permanent halt before the full operations start in January 2026. We also learned in the meeting that when asked how long is the river going to be dirty for, they said, well, they are going to be excavating for at least 1.5 to 2 years in accordance with the airport timeline. So that's 2 years of a brown river and decades or maybe even centuries more of the after effects of taking out an entire mountainside. So what we are calling for is a permanent halt and immediate restoration of the damaged area that has already been excavated. To give you some background context, right? So in these community meetings, we were presented with what they call draft ESIAs. So there are no actual environmental social impact assessments that have been submitted to physical planning. And I just want to tell you, or approved. Or approved, right. So it has not been approved, which means that they have no permission from our relevant authorities to operate at this site currently. And we just wanted to highlight the law, Dominican law, under our Physical Planning Act, where it says, no person shall carry out any development of land except under and in accordance with the terms of a development permission granted in that behalf prior to the commencement of any development on an application submitted to physical planning. And then section 23 of that same act says, unless the authority otherwise determines, environmental impact assessments shall be required in accordance with Schedule 2, which includes, as you can see down here, Schedule 2 includes all mining activities, whether it's quarrying or whether it's a different type of mine. They absolutely require an environmental social impact assessment for them to even before they commence any work. And again, just a checklist. So all this is available online on the physical planning website if you wanted to read more. But just to let you know, for quarry and mining activities under the physical planning division, they are required to submit an application that includes all relevant maps, a description of the materials to be extracted, total and annual tonnage of the excavated material, description of any development or infrastructure works, their traffic volumes, an environmental social impact assessment, their restoration plan for the site, their hours of operation, and an environmental management plan to mitigate any impacts to people and place. What has also been told to us is that the reason why they are at Daywash is because Crapo Hall, the operations at Crapo Hall is, depending on who you're talking to, I guess, from the representative, whether it's a government representative or developer, they have said that Crapo Hall is either very low in operation at this current time or is not in operation. So we actually visited Crapo Hall and Ansley because we found out from a community meeting past Sunday about Crapo Hall, where they presented to us another draft environmental social impact assessment, that Crapo Hall is in full operation. And they actually had a section on that ESIA talking about alternative locations to the Crapo Hall quarry. And this draft that they presented to us was written in October 2025. And under the alternative location section, Daywash was never mentioned. There are actually some people in this room who witnessed that conversation. And we pressed them about that. Why was Daywash never mentioned? And they said because the quarries considered for the international airport were Ansley, which you can see on top of here, which they no longer operate, and Crapo Hall, which you can see here. This was taken over the weekend. You can see it's in full operation. And the material at Crapo Hall that we found is actually very similar, or as you can see, the same to Daywash, except Daywash has a little something extra. And we will talk more about that in the next presentation.
Right. So thank you, Jeanette. So at the first meeting, at the first meeting in Concord, the only representative from the developers was an environmental engineer. He came alone, and at that meeting, I know the guy, and we were prepared with all our questions. We did our background information, and it was like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt because we don't know him, we don't know his expertise. And then he started presenting, and the first map he presented to us was this map on the side here, to your right. And the green blobs on the map represent the national parklands. But anybody who knows the maps or in the environmental space or even tourism knows this map is incorrect. I mean, look at it. Roads were even spelled wrong. Yeah, so he showed us this map, and we were like, that's not the correct map. We're both ecologists, we both work in the rainforest, we are aware of the boundary lines, and we actually had to show him on physical flying website, this is the correct map. This map on the left is actually the map on the physical website that you could download, everybody has access to, and you can see it's clearly different than what we have here. Because this map is saying that the Kalinago territory in the Central Forest System, so that's incorrect. Yeah, so first impression wasn't the best. And so based on our own observations, and I've hiked that area and talking to past forestry officers, looking at the damage that's been happening, we believe that they were encroaching on protected lands. And now we have evidence that not just from us, but like they are actually within the Northern Forest Reserve. So this is a map provided by Lands and Service. And in that red circle, you see these red little patches. These are actual evidence that they are encroaching on inside the Northern Forest Reserve. Also, before you leave it, we were told at the meeting that there's no way they are going to go into the protected lands. They will never do that. They even provided a buffer zone. And the buffer zone is going to, from going inside the park, as you can see right now, there is no space for any buffer zone.
Speaking about this map, one good thing that came up from our pressure on the relevant agencies was that they then had to go into the site and actually establish or remember, I guess, remember what the boundary markers are. So our pressure has essentially gotten the agencies to go into the area, to do surveys, to observe the forest, to observe the river, and start producing the report. So that's how we managed to get this from the temporary halt last week, where they allowed for some investigation to commence.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so this red map here was taken from the first meeting we had with the engineer. Oh, I think we forgot to mention, at these meetings, these are public consultations, but we were not allowed to take any pictures, we were not allowed to record anything. That was the rules that the engineer gave us, or unless the meetings would not happen. I say it's a public consultation and we don't have a right to record. That's strange. So at that meeting, we got a photo of the proposed area of the mine. So that's the red map here. So that's from his PowerPoint. We took that image and we questioned him. Thank you. Thank you. So we questioned him, like, is this the actual size? Like, yes, that's the size, and that's about 80 acres. So I was like, okay, 80 acres, I agree, I don't know. So I went home and I have a bit of GIS background, so I put it on QGIS, plotted the points, got the different coordinates, and lo and behold, it's about 160 acres big.
So twice the size what he told us in the community it was going to be.
Right, twice the size. Also, he mentioned buffer zones and it's not going in protected lands. I use the Northern Forest Reserve map. So this hard line between here is the Northern Forest Reserve line, and the orange represents the amount that is within protected lands. So it's about half of what they're going to mine is going to be within the Northern Forest Reserve. And yeah.
Yeah, so we also just wanted to bring up another law because we love laws sometimes. So this is our National Parks and Protected Areas Act. And in this act, it says very clearly, all lands in the parks and all lands set apart as protected areas are dedicated to the people of Dominica for their benefit, education, and enjoyment. And these lands within the national park system shall be maintained so as to leave them unimpaired, left alone for the enjoyment of our future generations. All right, these lands were created for a reason.
Oh.
Yeah, the video is not going to play in PDF.
Yeah, I think it's okay. We could. Yeah, we're just going to show you some
Yeah.
of what's going on. So this right here is up at the mine site up in Debash, and there's a lot of runoff, and it goes into the drains and goes straight into the river. This right here is the dump site. Oh, it's gone. But anyway, they dump most of the topsoil. They got lower down into the village, and they have exhausted the space to dump the topsoil. So one of our questions was like, where are they going to dump all this topsoil? Because they're clearly not halfway through what they're doing, and there's a lot of material to move.
To give you some perspective, what they have currently excavated is roughly 20 acres. And remember, they are going to go to 160 acres. So if we're receiving all of this impact from 20 acres, what is going to happen to us with 160 acres gone?
Great. Well, not great. The river is not running clean. Over the past few months, we've been observing what's been going on, and we've observed different types of runoff. So the runoff from these come from straight from the mine or straight from the trucks, because these trucks carry a lot of mud on their tires, and so along the highway, they muddy the road, and when rain falls, it runs into the water. They also have a truck that sprays the road. You have to keep it clean, but that just channels the dirt into the river at the end of the day. We've also observed since they started the halt, they're not doing any heavy work there anymore, but when the rain falls, you still see heavy, muddy runoff.
Like today.
Yeah, like today. So in August and November, we observed constant, uncontrolled release of runoff, and alongside below the mine, which is, the river is like less than 100 meters away from it. There are different types of runoff. There are runoff that flows heavy and proud, and there's some that is very, like, how do you describe it? Like
Trickling.
it's trickling, it's like seeping into it, so it's like a cloud. And you are on a downhill gradient, so gravity is gonna do its job and get it into the lowest point, which is the river.
And another thing about that, so we brought this up in the meeting because we walked the river a couple of times. And so in the first meeting, he said that the river was running 95% clean right now because they had filtered. But Gary and I actually walked that river about 4 days before that meeting, and they said they cleaned it 2 weeks before. And we actually have the water samples here that we took from the river to show you how cloudy it was at the time. But they are talking about controlling the culverts. So what we showed to them is that this area is actually a watershed. There's a ravine that runs straight through, and the land naturally drains. So all here, you're getting these runoffs, but there's no culvert to put a filtration system on. It's simply the land draining. So how are you going to control? How are you accounting for that?
Wait, before we never touched on the pulse. So August, November is constantly flowing in, and that's where a lot of people took pictures saying that the river is dirty, is constantly dirty. In late November, we started to observe something different. The water was clearing up, but then it was also dirty, and it was doing it strangely than it was before. What we noticed was there was like a pulse of release. So the water wasn't completely going muddy, because there were times that they would dump the mud in here, which would cause that dirty effect.
Yes.
So because it's not constant, when it gets down lower to the village, it doesn't appear as brown as this, because it half time dilutes. But it's still pollution, it's still dirty water.
Right. Okay. So.
Forest and Wildlife Act.
Yeah, another law. Yay. So as you can see, this current project is infringing on a number of our laws, which is why we brought them all up. So we have the Forestry and Wildlife Act that specifically speaks to deleterious substances. So any substance, if added to water, would endanger the subsistence and maintenance of fish and other aquatic life resided in the water, right? So about this substance, Section 27 says, no person shall deposit or permit the deposit of a deleterious substance of any type in water frequented by fish, shrimps, or crab, or in any place where the deleterious substance may enter the water. Now, I know people of Concord know that that river is filled with life, so yay. And section 29 says, no person engaged in land clearing or other operations shall put any slush into any water frequented by fish, shrimps, or crab, or into any stream that flows into such waters. Our rivers are protected for a reason.
Yeah, they are protected. So the image behind all these words is actually the river rocks that we took a picture a few weeks ago. And Janelle and I thought this was like some kind of microorganism. It looks strange, it's not just sediment. We actually talked to an expert in microalgae, and he told us this isn't microalgae, this is bacteria. This is actually bacteria that is blooming in the water. And that's because when there's runoff, the soil is rich. The soil has different minerals, different ions, and one of the key ones that Dominica has is the iron. So these bacteria consume the iron and they have a bloom because this river ecosystem is not used to having that much iron within it. So they'll have a bloom, and what will happen is that they will consume a lot of oxygen in the water that the fish require. And so it'll smother the species, the aquatic species, if the bloom continues, and then you'll have loss of river life. Downstream, you'll have stress in the corals, chronic stress, long-term population decline. But seeing these type of blooms isn't anything strange. It happens in other ecosystems, but those ecosystems are used to it. Like in Isidora.
Well, where we have hydrothermal vents,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of sulfur that leaches, a lot of volcanic activity in the area that is leaching the iron, which is why you have that orange color in our sulfur springs. It's actually iron filling up that pool. So in those ecosystems, they've adapted to this, but you would also notice that in those sections of that river, you would find things like bio. You wouldn't find some of our crayfish species because they cannot survive in these environments. They have not been adapted to these environments. So this, yes, somebody said that, Mother Nature floods our rivers and releases a lot of sediments, but she does this in pulses, right? So there's a flood, and for most of the time, the river runs clean, it runs clear. This is a constant release. The sediments, so it's not just a metal-rich runoff, but it's also the fine sediments that are settling on the bottom of the river. That's why for those of you who have bathed in the river since, you experience that itching on your skin. So you can imagine with the smaller organisms, these fine sediments are shredding them. These fine sediments are clogging their gills. These fine sediments are covering their homes. These fine sediments are actually depleting the river as well, in addition to the bacterial blooms, of oxygen. So their reproduction, their eggs, their young ones are not surviving as well. And what you're going to have over time, if this runoff continues like this, is you're going to have a die-off. You're going to see less and less life in your river. And some people in the community are even noting it to us. So it's not just what's in the river, but you have species like the quavier, right? The birds that hunt in the river, because there's no visibility, you're not seeing them around the river like you should, because they can't hunt anymore. It's the same thing with the Daywash Valley. According to Gary's research, that Daywash Valley is the fourth densest area for parrots in Dominica from when he studied. And then they told us in the community meeting that because the parrots are becoming a nuisance now, that clearing the forest is actually helping people. But you have farmers in the room who would tell you that because of all of this land movement in the northeast to east, that it's actually driving a lot of birds to their area because they're seeking refuge. They're seeking quiet spaces. It's not just the removal of trees, but it's also the noise disturbance. So you're displacing our wildlife, both in the air, on land, and in the river by this activity.
Great. Yeah, so this is the same area that we filmed in October and November. As you can see, from October to November, the level of runoff increase is much healthier. And this was the 95% filter runoff that they were talking about, that we found out the few days before we had that meeting when they made that claim.
Yeah, and as you can see, this runoff is also not coming from a culvert. So again, how do you control for that?
Yeah, the river is not clean. The river is fine and it meets international levels. Yeah. So we were told that at the meeting that the river is fine and it has meeting international standards. What the standards are, well, you can see for yourself. It's a mess. This is the popular pool Basemajo. As you can see, you can't see the bottom of the river. Those who are familiar with the pool knows that you could see the bottom of the river. You could see those rocks. This is the Pego River mouth. This is near Hatton Garden. And this right here is below the dump site. So where they dump that huge pile of dirt, there's a drain that the dirty water seeps into the water.
And
But yeah, you want to talk about it?
yeah, you can see in the Macho Basel, in the areas where it runs slower, all the fine sediments that are accumulating on the bottom, which is also allowing for bacteria to bloom in these areas.
So, noise is affecting children. This was brought up during first meeting, where a parent brought up that, hey, the trucks on the road are disturbing the classroom. The teachers are complaining that, hey, they have to stop every few minutes for the trucks to pass by. These are students at the Concord Primary School. And I tried to count them. There's about 10, 15 trucks almost every hour when the project was full steam ahead. At the first meeting, someone made a point that there was no sanitation facilities at the site. And we asked him how many people work at this site. He said, well, there's 25, 30 people every day. And they really started doing heavy work in August, September, October. We are in November, and there's no toilet on site. And so his reply was that they are planning to do this. They're planning to have this, planning to have this, but like, that should have been there already. So where the guys going? His response was that the workers use the Crapo Hall site in Pego. So anybody who's familiar with that, Crapo Hall is about 10-minute drive away from it. So that's where they have to use. But the gentleman also brought up another issue that, hey, if they don't have proper sanitation, maybe they're using the area around, but we can't prove it. But there was a disaster that happened in Haiti post the earthquake, where UN helpers from Nepal came to help restore Haiti, but they did not have proper sanitation facilities. These people from Nepal have a natural resistance against cholera. But because they didn't have proper sanitation facilities, their waste seeped into the waterways of the Haitians, and that cost the life of 10,000 Haitian people. So we don't want something to repeat like that. Okay, so this is some survey maps created in 2016. This was after Tropical Storm Erica. As you can see, this is the outline, a rough outline of where they're about to mine, and the red represents high susceptibility to landslides. So one of our fears is that it's going, with all the trees, without the topsoil, it's just going to have huge landslides. And behind this area here has a lot of tributaries. This map doesn't show everything. And what we fear is that a landslide might come down and create a dam, and then we have huge flooding that will affect the communities. Because we're not privy to a lot of information, maybe a dam could develop and then it bursts surprisingly and affect the communities below.
Yeah, so we just wanted to show this map. This is an aerial view of the site currently, well, as of the end of November. Because we've heard multiple stories about what the site is going to be used for. It's going to be used for quarry for the airport. It's going to be used as just a crushing plant to make up for the time for Crapo Hall. But as you can see, there are all these exploratory roads. So this is the area that is currently in national parklands, in the forest reserve, sorry. but there's this road that's going up and up and up.
Yep.
So if you are just trying to set up a pouring
Crusher.
facility, a crushing facility, why are you trying to go so high into our forests right now? What are you
What's the purpose of
looking
this?
for? What is the purpose of this? Is it to map your boundaries? Is it to find the pegs for the forest reserve? Like, what is going on here? And that is part of the reason why we are here today, is to present the information, but to also ask for the information. Because, I mean, the quickest way to discredit us, I guess, is with the truth, right? So, and we were very happy to be disproved with whatever information that was presented when you show us yours, in a sense.
Great. So some of you may have signed this, some of you may have not. We'd really appreciate if you all come on board. But this is an international petition to halt the Daywash mine. And this screenshot was taken a few days ago, but we've hit over 4,000 people who have signed it online. We put QR codes at the front of the entrance. You could scan it with your phones, but we also have physical petitions there if you want to sign and support the cause.
Yeah, okay, so just to go back to what I said, when I said we're asking for the information, we are not just asking for it, we're demanding it, and we have a right to do so. Again, going back to our legal system, Dominica ratified two very important international agreements. We have the Escazú Agreement, which is a regional agreement on access to information, public participation, and justice in environmental matters in Latin America and the Caribbean. And then you have the International Labor Law 169, which speaks to indigenous and tribal peoples' convention. So the rights of indigenous people to determine what they deem as development, what they want to see as development, and how their communities are going to be affected and operated. How are they going to carry on with their culture and their ways of life? So when we're looking at access, right? Access rights are the right of access to environmental information, the right of public participation in the environmental decision-making process, and the right of access to justice in environmental matters. Each party, so party is Dominica, shall guarantee the right of every person to live in a healthy environment and any other universally recognized human rights related to the present agreement. And that's something that we have to emphasize. A clean environment is a basic human right. And we all have a right to ask questions when it affects us or does not affect us. To just ask questions. We all have a right to participate in the decision-making process, and they have to guarantee us safety to be able to speak up. That is what the law says. Yeah, so we want this stopped because we honestly do not see how they can continue and not infringe on the law. But this is an artistic impression, by the way, of a mine inside of the Daywash area. Yeah, the first picture's not loading right now. But we want to know what you think.
So let's give a round of applause before we start typing answers. That was fantastic. Very informative. So do we have any questions from the crowd? I'll bring the mic to you.
Thanks, Janella and Gary, for your brief stance on this and your expertise. It is being said that it has been halted, but when I passed there today, there was activity going on. Do you know what is going on right now?
So, to say it more specifically, there was a halt of some operations, and that they were halting, I believe, until Monday that passed, for them to be able to, I guess, understand better the paperwork and put the necessary paperwork in place. What we understand from one of the agencies is that they are continuing to operate in the area that they have already cleared in the meantime. We're not sure what exactly is going on, but that is the information we've received.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also want to commend you, Janelle and Gary, for your bravery and your research and your time and it's inspiring for all of us to be here tonight. I wanted to ask a question about a slide from the earlier on. It said something about the rights to that land had been given, the exploratory rights have been given, but to whom? So when we're talking about they, who has the rights to do this activity?
Oh, you're talking about the timeline? Where
Yeah,
we
on
said
the
land-
timeline, like who is actually, what company entity is in charge of this project?
Yeah, okay, so what we learned from the community meetings is that the project directive is coming directly from the Office of the Prime Minister. The developer is Montreal Management, and the subcontractors are the Chinese Railway No. 5 Engineering Group, or CR5. So the land was essentially handed over, I guess, by the public sector to facilitate this project.
So Montreal Management has the right to, can you be more specific about what, or the,
Well, so-
when you say it was handed, what does that mean?
So we haven't seen the documents, right, to understand what the terms are for the land, what the MOU is between Montreal Management and the agencies that handed over the land, or the documents that tie this site to the airport. So we actually cannot speak to that. We can't tell you what their right is. We can't tell you fully what they are doing, but the community has been asking for months for the information for us to understand better what their intent is behind that site. But our thing is, if your intent was so simple, you would present the documents.
Yeah, big, huge problem.
Yeah.
We'll have 2 more questions, but before, PV551, your car, PV551, your lights are on. So if that's you, you might want to go, you know?
Yeah, thank you and good evening. First of all, I want to commend you for your immeasurable work. We cannot quantify what you have done. Basically, I wish to know whether you have engaged any regional or international entity in assisting your group and Dominica, those who wish to have this project stopped at Deux.
Yes, we have engaged international bodies on this current situation because once the video started flowing, the 2 videos, a lot of people started reaching out to us because Janelle and I have connections to people in the environmental space, and they have been reaching out like, how can they assist? Could they help with the mapping? Could they help with the expertise, legal advice, and that sort? So we have been talking to a lot of people, especially I had a good conversation with someone who is an engineer who actually worked on an airport, and he was like, Gary, this is a mess. All what they're doing should not be happening. And he sat us down, go through the protocols to what should be happening to help prevent such pollution into our water systems. Another note I think we didn't mention was that Janelle mentioned who the engineer works for, the CR4, Montreal Management. Well, if he works for the developer, how could he produce the EIA? There's a huge conflict of interest there. The consultant who is producing the EIA should be independent of the contractors and developers, but that's not the case here. And someone confronted him at that in one of the meetings. I said, well, Dominica doesn't have a lot of capacity, and that's just how things is here. So it shouldn't be that way. And we don't think the EIA that is currently being drafted is fair.
And we've also, I mean, people have reached out, but we've also done our fair share of reaching out to our networks. Gary and I have represented Dominica regionally and internationally and spoken on many forums. So
we have our, I guess, tentacles out there. But you will hear from our next presenter, and that's exactly how we managed to find the expertise of our next presenter, was reaching out to our contacts in the region, who then provided us, with where to go. Because I mean, this is happening in Dominica, yes, but it's a regional occurrence, it's a global occurrence. So there are lots of people in our neighboring islands or neighboring islands who have gone through, sadly, similar situations and know how to help us navigate this one. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is a support out there, and a lot of people are ready and willing and able to help us.
So, not clap because I have one hand, but again, commend you on this and taking the stand and being the first one to, set the stage. But in terms of addressing how we can stop this and being solutions oriented, I have done some research and found that we actually can file a formal complaint to the International Aviation, or the body that regulates the formation and the development construction of international airports. So it's an international civil aviation organization, and we can file a complaint with them because one of the requirements when you are building an aerodrome is that you have minimal impact to the communities and also to the environment, and also that you must do environmental impact studies, and you must community engagement, none of which has been done either for the site at Wesley and especially not for the site at the Wash. So I represent an organization that already has drafted a full complaint letter to all of the people involved, including MMC, including CR5, including the international regulatory body. So, there's things we can do. And hopefully this forum will get enough international support that we'll be able to do what we can to raise funds to draw legal representation from outside of our Dominican communities. I guess what I'm saying is that we have ways we can go forward. We just kind of all need to get together and collaborate and do what we need to do. And by any means necessary, stop this from happening. Thank you very much.
I just want to add on one thing to what she said. Thank you so much. We found out in the meeting last Sunday when we were discussing Capitol Hall, or the developer was discussing Capitol Hall with us, that there are 8 environmental social impact assessments drafted for the airport, and only 2 of them have been approved. So I don't know what 2, I believe one of them, from what we understand, is the crushing plant at Hatton Garden. I'm not sure what the other one is, but we really need to hold people accountable and find out that information.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Quickly, I want to commend Gary and the survey lady here, and also the lady who just spoke. I'm an aviation security officer, Douglas Charles, and I want to make my voice heard because I'm also I'm from Concord, that's where I live, and I'm greatly affected by what is happening. And I'm not ashamed to say it because I've said it in the week at work. Some days I only get to wash my work uniform, and that's about it. For months, I'm not able to wash because the Roscoe is not on, and the river is a mess. And my children basically lives in the river. Someone knows that is where we live, VO and everything. And this morning, Matt is here. I think it's this afternoon, the press briefing was on. He asked a question, the Prime Minister responded. I listened to all of it. And I'm thinking that he may feel that he's coming, and this is not political. That's what I want them to understand at first. This is people's life that we are dealing with. It is the children's future. And if all of us are silent because we are afraid of victimization, then what do we represent in this country? I'm a Christian first, and I always say to everybody, I represent the kingdom of heaven. I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and then earth. And this is a small piece of what the Garden of Eden is like. And the lovely man, when he spoke, I'm saying this is what it is. God doesn't want us to sit down. And I've said it. The nation is supposed to be built on what the Lord wants it to be built on, not on what we think. And then so many of us are so political that we are not seeing that Concord, yes, is being affected, but it can affect Portsmouth. It affects Roseau. It affects the Prime Minister at one point. It's going to affect everybody in the country. And I said it recently that I am no longer going to be silent because I am not here for what people have to say. I'm here for everybody. And if I am silent, my 5 children and no grandson is going to suffer, and he hasn't gotten an opportunity to bathe in that river. And then I have to cross that river at 4 o'clock in the morning without, sometimes my boots got stolen twice. I have to cross that river in, and then it's dirty, mucky. It's just, one Sunday, my children and I went to the river to bathe, to go to church, and the river was okay. And by the time I put up my head, I have to be pulling them out. Do not wash your private part in there, because the water just started coming down, and we had to go home. No water to bathe, and we, like, what to do? So there is media personnel here. He may be looking at it. The citizens of Dominica, rise up, not for what you think Concord is doing, but for all of us. Because I work at the airport and hear the taxi operators complain about their vehicles. Person from town come, I just wash my transport. What is happening? Nobody's home. We have, I think our pal rep is what, he's supposed to be something to do with environment. Where is he? Where is he? The last I heard that he wasn't even aware of what is happening. This is nonsense. And somebody needs to understand this is nonsense. Our country cannot be crying and everybody is sleeping. We're talking about gun violence, but this is a violation, and it isn't, to me, it isn't worse, because as soon as you cut down all the streets, you start killing people. So I just want to thank you all.
Thank you. Very well said, Mikala. And we didn't even get to touch on that human aspect that's affecting the community. And I'm so glad you stood up and said that, because not everybody has access to their own water system. For those of you who don't know, tuna means water. And where I'm from is Tuna Ute, or Tuna Water Village. And so we have a lot of tributaries that feed into that great river, the Concord River. And a lot of families have their own water system, but some people depend on Duasco. And as you're saying, not all the time we have water from Duasco. So then people were like, well, we have the river right there, we can just use it. No, we don't have that privilege anymore. And it's a shame to see what's going on. As you said, we do, our parent is the Minister of Environment. He's not aware of what's going on. Last time I spoke to him, he said he's investigating the matter, and he'll put out a statement on what's going on. But so far, we haven't heard anything, but we will continue the fight without the minister.
Yeah, I also just want to mention that, just for knowledge, the Prime Minister, the President, and the Minister of Environment were invited to this session, because, again, we're all inclusive. They're not here, I guess they choose not to come, but, you know, people are asking where is the minister. They were invited, and we would have welcomed them here to contribute or to answer questions. Thank you.
Hey, Gary, so thank you guys so much for the presentation. I myself, I'm a project manager, I work in construction. I've had to deal with a lot of remediation systems and those kind of things when I'm doing work. And a lot of the time it's, oh, but this is a more expensive option. How do we find a cheaper option? I know you talked about one of your friends and one of the guys you guys talked to in international media, and they said, oh, this is not being done the correct way. I know that one option is nothing changes. We work exactly as is going on right now, which is what the government wants. The other option is stop everything completely. I think there has to be somewhere in the middle where, as you said, doing it the correct way. Because we cannot just say every single time anything that's being done has to be stopped completely. Is there a middle ground that we're looking at where the mine continues? One, it does not impede in the nature forest, because I think that's a big thing we have to make sure that it's not getting encroached. And number two, is there a way that the river is not dirtied? I know we talked about culverts, but I know that there are ways of mitigating water runoff on roads, rivers. And is that something that we're looking at and presenting an actual functional way of doing?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to go back to Crackle Hall. So with Daybrush, we don't think that there is another way, because if they were to go any further, that's protected lands, and we will never support them destroying any of our protected lands. If they avoided the protected lands, they would not have enough area to do. Actually, again, we don't even fully know what they're doing, but what that they are going to do. Our proposal would be to stay at Crapo Hall, because they claim that they are day wash because they can't operate at Crapo Hall, but we know you're operating at Crapo Hall. Again, there is similar material there. There's a lot more material there. So why is it that you are at day wash? And that's what we're asking, because there are other sites where they currently have an operation where they could be. We will ask, I guess, to propose alternatives, but we are not geologists or geotechnical people or environmental or civil engineers, so we will leave that to the other experts to do. But our understanding is that they came to Day Wash, which was said on the DBS live at the site, because they can't operate at Crapo Hall, but they are operating there. So we just asked them to go back, stay in that area, and to figure out how to minimize the impact there where they've already dug out a significant they also told us in the meeting on Sunday, actually, when we were talking about Crapo Hall, that day wash is actually expensive for them to do, which is why they never considered it as a mine for the airport in the first place. So why, if it was that expensive because of the distance or whatever it is that you claim, why are you there now?
Question. Good night, everybody. I listened to the Prime Minister. I was at the news conference today and asked him specifically why they wash. He said his engineers told him that in terms of density, I'm not an engineer, they wash is presenting the best soil at this time, so they don't think that they can go elsewhere. Is there anywhere around the island that they will be able to compare in terms of the density of the soil? I just asking that question because he says the engineer told him that is the best they're looking for.
I actually think that is a great segue into the next presentation. We were told that as well in the community meeting, that one of the reasons why they are at Day Wash is because the material at Day Wash is stronger than Crapo Hall. Again, this comparison with Crapo Hall. But I think right here, perhaps we should stop and allow the next presentation to give us more information.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know I said for two other individuals that I'll come and do questions, but let's do the other presenter and then we'll go back to question and answer, and hopefully you'll still have it top of mind. So once again, a round of applause for Janelle and Gary. And we will welcome Mr. Simon Mitchell to the floor. Simon Mitchell is a professor of geology at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. He is a leading Caribbean geologist whose work focuses on the geological evolution of the Caribbean region, including volcanic island formation, rock formations, and mineral-bearing formations. Professor Mitchell has carried out extensive field research across the Caribbean and has published widely on Caribbean geology. He has received several awards recognizing his contribution to the development of geological research in the Caribbean. He is also a trusted public educator, having taken part in over 130 radio and television interviews where he explains geological issues to the public and contributes to informed discussion on land use, natural resources, and environmental protection. Thank you so very much for being here, Mr. Simon.
Thank you. First thing, as you can probably hear, is I've got laryngitis. So I'm going to do my best. Hopefully we'll get through this. So, if we look back, if we look back in time, this area came up as interesting, really to the British, they were still colonial masters of these areas. And they were looking across the area and really looking at the different potentials for the different islands. Now, the way they do that is they go out and they look at rivers, they collect sediment samples, and then they look at the metals in them. Now, most of that information is gone, and we can place bits of it back together by looking at reports, and you saw one of the reports before. And they were very short, but some of them still exist. Now, the first one was 1966, which was done in Britain, and that one was 71 samples taken from rivers across Dominica. And what they did was, there were 3 from this particular river system. And what they did was they looked at them and they found out there were levels of copper in those river samples up to about 200, 250 in some cases, parts per million. That's 0.02%. Not much. But it indicates there is copper around. Now, there wasn't a particular concentration anywhere. So it went on to 1969, and at that point, Guyana, the British Guiana Geological Survey, came to Dominica and started some studies. And that's where they identified this area as containing copper deposits. And they got certainly 200 parts per million, again, this time from rocks. And that led them to go and do a drilling exercise. And so they drilled here at least 3 sites, and they got copper up to 2%. So what we know is that this area was looked at, and there was a suggestion that at depth, there is probably copper. Now this, of course, led to BHP looking at the area, because BHP picks up things every so often, and thinking this might be an area to actually explore. And of course, they didn't at the end of the day, because again, people got up in arms and wanted to go against it and said, no, we don't want this happening. Okay, so there is a likelihood of some things. And the other thing is, where there's copper in these systems, especially the volcanoes, there's often gold. So there's also the gold aspect that comes into play. So what do I do? Well, I mean, I look at rocks, okay? I'm a geologist, I look at rocks. I look at them for any reason. I'm looking at these rocks to try to explain to you what they are and what they mean. Because if you understand what they mean, you can make your own informed decisions about them. And I think that's important, to have information, to have fair information. So I've been here for 4 days, and we've been sampling around this area, and we've been looking at the rocks. And what we do, we go around with a big hammer, basically, knock bits off. Some people have probably seen this. Then I use a hand lens, basically, to look at the rocks. So you have a little loop, and then you look at the broken rocks. And if you've got the expertise, you can work out what they are. And you can see minerals in them, and you can see metals in them. Okay, so it's very easy to go through and actually do this sort of thing. And I've done it in many countries, this particular aspect. So what we're going to do is to look and see, okay, we talked about the history. Is there evidence in this area of these sort of things? What is the geology of this area? What does that tell us about it? Now, I've got to give you a little geology lesson, I'm afraid. Okay? I can't talk about things unless I explain something to you. So, you know you live in a volcanic island. Okay, you know you've got really lots and lots of volcanoes, and they produce igneous rocks. And igneous rocks are not all the same. They have different proportions of what we call silicon dioxide. So on this side over here, I've got the increasing the amount of silica. And based on the amount of silica, we can name.
So those with low proportions of silica are called basalt. You go up through these others like andesite and grease. And that gives you And there's other things. So the basalt is dark. I'm going to see some of these in a minute. And the basalt is pale. The lilac is pale. Now, the other thing is that the amount of gas in them is different. The temperature is different. The temperature is different also. And they have different characteristics. So when you have the basalts are runny. Okay, they're not viscous. So what you find with those is that they produce lava flows. So when you go on the television and you see something like the eruptions in Hawaii, you see these flows. Okay? And that's one sort of type of eruption. But additionally, when you get the more acidic ones, they have much more gas in them, and they're not running. Okay, they're much more viscous because they don't like to run. And that means the type of eruption is very different. The eruptions are explosive, and you know that when you see the blocks and things in some of the deposits. And what I find is that these sorts of different rocks often form at different times. So if you look at the older rocks in Dominica, they're basalts and basaltic andesites. If you look at the rocks in the modern volcanoes, they're actually up in these andesites and basalts. So there's a difference. And another difference is that it's these more silica-rich ones which are associated with the mineralization of copper. So that's the sort of things that you see. Okay, so we worked our way through this area, and we did one transect up a ridge, and we did the obvious transect along the road, and we sampled all the rocks along the road. Okay? So what we found is that we've got two groups of rocks in this area. There's one called, I've got the A in here, and this is a basaltic andesite. Now this area is part of the oldest part of Dominica. When you look at many countries, many islands, old rocks are many, many millions of years old. This is the oldest part, but this is only about 6 or 7 million years old. Okay, so in the global context, it's not very old, but for Dominica, it's the oldest you have here. Okay? Now, associated with that, we've got these andesites. And the andesites are really quite altered. A lot more silica in them, so you've got these pieces of quartz, and you'll see some of that. But also, you probably can't see it, but all these little spots on there, all of those are some of these metallic minerals. Okay, and they go by the name of pyrite or fool's gold. Because people find it and they think they've got gold, and it's not gold. But that being said, it's an indicator. It's an indicator to other things there. And so when you see lots of this pyrite, you know that there's going to be a closely related one, which we call chalcopyrite, pyrite, which is the one that contains copper. Okay, so pyrite itself is just iron sulfide. The chalcopyrite is copper sulfide, or copper iron. And that's one of the major pores of copper. As I say, it's an indicator of other things associated with how you often get other minerals like gold. Now, the other thing is that there's also an anomaly in this area, which also has lead and zinc. So there's also some lead and zinc in these areas. Okay? Now, I just ringed in here, got a ring here. That's the sort of area where we found
the pyrite. Okay. And where is the area where the workings are? Coincidence, maybe? I don't know. What I can do is I can present you the information. Okay, so let's have a little look at some of these minerals. So we have these nicely photographed for us this morning. And I've actually got the specimens if anybody wants to see this. Okay, so this is one of the more basaltic ones. Okay, so this is basaltic. You can see it's dark colored. You can see it's got crystals in it. So these are the crystals. Okay, pale crystals. They're things called feldspars. Doesn't really matter. That's what they are. So these are crystalline rocks. Okay, and that would be the lava flow. Okay, now, yes, lava flows, basalt lava flows are good for things like making aggregates. So in other words, when you're making aggregates, they are good. You crush them, and you get a rock which is relatively useful in that sense. But not always of a high quality. Okay? And most or many of the quarries are working basalts. So many of the quarries, and we visited several other quarries, on Dominica are actually working basalts. So the question would be, how good are the basalts in all of these quarries? Okay, do they meet the rock standards or not? And we'll come back to that soon. Let's have a look at another one. So this is another one. This one's actually got some pyrite in it, but you can't see it. I've got one which hopefully you will be able to see the pyrite. But this one again is a basalt, and this basalt has got, again, it's got crystals. You can't see them so clearly. All right, but we were talking about the iron getting into the river. Okay, now the reason these rocks are dark is partly because they're fine grained, but also because they contain dark minerals. And those dark minerals contain particularly iron and magnesium. So what happens in a tropical environment is that these rocks rot, is what I like to say. Okay, it's warm, it's humid, there's thick soils, and what actually happens is that chemical weathering breaks down the rocks. And you've got to think about it. Where do they form? They formed at the surface, but they were hot. So the minerals that actually crystallize are stable at high temperatures, something like 800 degrees centigrade. So when they're sitting around at 30 degrees centigrade in this nice, warm, tropical environment, the minerals don't like it, and the minerals break down. They break down and produce clay, and what you end up with is these thick clays which coat your mountainsides, your steep gullies, which are basically the weathering down and the cutting of valleys through the volcanoes. And so you get a lot of these iron minerals coming out and going into the clays, as they get lots and lots of clays. And of course, they're all locked down by the vegetation. So it's only when you get a natural landslide that, you would get some siltation and material being transported into the river systems. But of course, if you set up large quarrying operations, then what actually happens in that situation is that you expose a large amount of these clays, and these clays then have the ability to be running off for the complete duration of the quarry. They can run off for wherever you dump the material you take out the quarry that you don't use. And it might take many, many years for a stability to come back in afterwards. And in that same time, you're probably not going to see the same trees come back. The ecosystem will be different because the invasive species will get in there first. So when you look at these rocks, you've got to think about that. So if we go to the next one, Now this is a pale one. So this is probably a taste. And here you can see the black minerals. Okay, those are actually a thing called amphiboles. Okay, but there's also free quartz in that, but it's not easy to see. If I had, I'm going to do it if I can get them home. If I can take pieces back, I'll take some nice photographs and share them back here, so that they can actually share them to people. But this is a different rock, okay? You can see it's paler. It's more acidic. In fact, this is a much younger one. It's actually from, I can't remember the quarry.
This rock is from Anne's domain.
Okay, there you go. So that this one is another one. But again, it's a good looking rock. It would probably make good crushed stone as well. Okay, it doesn't look like it's got a lot of porosity. So let's go on to the next. Okay, so we sort of talked about copper. Now, we ought to sort of say why you get copper. So what we have, of course, we have volcanoes. Okay, and the volcanoes are produced by the melting of material going down the subduction zone. It melts and then it comes back up to the surface. Okay, and it's what we call a plumbing system in a volcano. And as it comes up, it sort of comes up, but you get not just the lavas, which will be at the top, this is in the heart of the volcano, but what you actually get is you get other fluids coming through it. So you get fluids which are rich in these metals, rich in this copper and this gold, and things like molybdenum and other things. And these are concentrated in layers deeper in the volcano. So these mining companies, what they're interested in is finding places where these have been eroded down so that they can get at where the metals are. And you see places, particularly in places like Chile, where you get these gigantic mines. That's what they showed you a picture of, I think, where you actually have these very, very large porphyry coppers that they are developing. Well, there probably is a porphyry copper underneath Dominica, but it's probably a long way down. And therefore that brings, the concern about, are people doing it? But what I can tell you is that if you've got something that's got 2% of copper, the chances of that ever getting to be an actual working mine are very little. Probably if you explored 100 of them, you'd be lucky to get one that works. So it probably isn't something that a reputable company would go and do. But that doesn't mean people can't go and try and do these things. Okay, so I think it's worthwhile bearing these sorts of things in mind. Okay, let's go to the next one. Yeah, you can sort of see it, I guess. Can you see this area in here and here, which should be goldenish? Does it look a bit goldenish? Yeah, it's really difficult to get photographs. Yeah, I think you can probably see that. That's the pyrite, that's the iron sulfide, the fool's gold. Okay, so that is the indicator that there actually is a deposit underneath which is going to contain other things. And if you tested this rock, it'd probably have a bit of copper in it as well. Okay, it might have a very, very small amount of gold, right? But it'll be microscopic, you wouldn't see it. You could go and pan in that river for the rest of your life and you probably wouldn't find 1 grain of gold. And you'll upset all their animals. So they're probably not a good thing to do. Okay, this is another one, and again, you can see. You see there's quite a lot of pyrite. It's quite obvious. So when you actually break these rocks, it's actually very obvious that these things are there. It's the sort of thing that, gives people an indication. I mean, if we go back to Jamaica, There's one company that's been looking in Jamaica for 15 years, and they took over from the previous company. And they are just brilliant. And, you know, if you talk to the geologists, they don't really think they're going to find anything. But they keep drilling. So, as I say, this is the way that you go to that. But they know what they're doing, and they know that. But there's also very sound environmental laws which people can't overstep. And I think that is the other very, very important thing. You've got to get your laws in order. Your laws have to be enforced. Okay? And then you can worry about what goes on, because you then have the ability to see those sorts of things. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so the supposed idea of the current requirements are that you need stone, in other words, aggregate, for the runways. Okay, now, that is not so straightforward. Okay, your stone has to meet international standards. Okay, and you cannot set up a big airport which is going to have large planes unless you use the aggregate which works. If you don't use the aggregate, you aren't going to get your airport certified. It's not going to work. So you have to use the right sorts of aggregates. You've got to find the right ones. It's got to have a no porosity. In other words, it mustn't take water in. Okay, you don't want something that soaks up water. So a lot of the young volcanics here, okay, your Ignimbrite type eruption type, they're porous. They would take in water. They would not make good aggregates. Okay, and then it's also what we have, what we call a good polished stone value. And that basically means that how many times can an aircraft land on that runway and the little bits of aggregate are still angular and provide a frictional surface to slow the plane down. Because the last thing you want is a surface which is slippery and the plane. So you have to find rocks that have the right characters. That's just two of them. There are other characters, but I picked on just two to say that. And typically it is things like basalts and granites that we use. And so there's lots of basalt. But of course there's a problem. And that is that we are in the tropics, and I've mentioned it, these rocks break down. These rocks aren't always the best. And when they were actually looking at Jamaica, the last time they were resurfacing the runways, they couldn't find any material that would meet the international standards at all in Jamaica. So they had to go to Canada to get material. Of course, Canada's cold, so you don't get the same tropical climates, so the rocks don't weather in the same way, don't break down. So I think, you know, somebody says dense. Dense is not an important character. What you need something that has the right characters to meet international standards for aggregates. Okay? I mean, a lump of lead is dense. You wouldn't put a lump of lead or a runway made out of lead. Okay, so I think the key thing is that you need to look and find the right sorts of things. I very much doubt that many of the quarries here have been looked at in the right way to characterize this. But the sort of thing that should be happening is all the quarries should be looked at. You should actually look at the quality of the aggregate and see if anything meets the requirements. Maybe nothing will, in which case you can only use some of it for the lower levels of the runways. But I think it's very important to understand that, you know, this is a gigantic project, and the only way of doing it is to do it properly. And that's to use, you know, science, engineering in the right way, and done to proper standards, both environmental and international. So that's really what I've said. I've had a look at what's here over a very short period of time. to try and see what was in that area and whether that throws any light on what's going on, and then to try and tell you something about the way we really should be looking at these sorts of things and what they might mean. And I hope that's useful.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so much.
Before we take questions from the audience, I want to ask you a question. Having visited the Crapo Hall Quarry with us, so one of the arguments is that the material at Dewash is stronger, it's denser, but based on what we found at Crapo Hall, can you comment?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that one can say. Certainly, along the river, we've got different types of rock. The ones which have pyrite, okay, are hydrothermally altered. I have no idea what they would look like as aggregates. And you can see that they're alternating along that river course. So what you would end up being able to extract out of that, I don't know. I think it would take quite a lot of looking at to work that out. When you're at Crapo Hall, what you see there is it's just basalt flows. Okay, it's just a stack of basalt flows with weather intervals between. But the aggregate that was coming out there looked reasonably good aggregate. No tests, but just from an observation, it's the sort of thing that you would go forward and test. That's the way I would say it. So I can't see why that isn't something that could be looked at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I feel like for me, my summary right now, and we have one more presenter to go, is that Dewash was never considered. It's affecting us all. It doesn't seem to be a better site. And so yes, some answers I think really are quite needed. But let's open it up to you guys. Any questions that we have for Professor Simon here?
Just Simon's good enough.
Okay, for Simon. So one question I had was that you said that with 2% copper, any reputable company would not really go after that. But would there be any benefits, any financial gains that are worthwhile with a 2% copper finance?
I think there was one sample that was 2%. If you had a whole, a vast area with 2%, then that would be worthwhile. But I don't think that is not the case at the present point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The question I have for you, Professor, is the culture of people and the things they do gives you an idea of the intentions, right?
Yes.
So, like race, the Caucasians have a certain way of doing things, the Africans and the Chinese. We are faced now with the Chinese, a different culture, maybe much more, I don't know, determined. Would that be considered in the likelihood of they taking the risk to go after the 2%?
I think the Chinese are more likely to go after things like that, yes. I do believe that they are likely to do that. You certainly see in their construction industry that they have a habit of building things, and if they fall down, well, they usually execute the people that build them and then just build them again. You see that coming out every so often. So I do think that there is a different sort of way of approaching it. I don't think that they have the right laws in there in looking at construction. And it's one of the problems I have when they come here and construct things. I've seen one of the pet things I talk about is road construction, largely because they don't use geology when they're constructing roads, and then it goes wrong, and it costs very large amounts of money to put it right. And so I told them to begin with when they put in the big road across Jamaica, the north-south highway, that you're going to have a problem here. And I put it in the newspaper. just to make sure that everybody knew about it. And they said, no, we're not. A year later, the company comes to me and says, we think we've got a problem. I said, yeah, I know we've got a problem. So they said, all right, we've got the cause, we'll show you the cause. So they showed me the cause. And I said, yeah, you're building on a landslide. The whole thing is a gigantic landslide. At that point, it's for the French company. The French company flew in 5 engineering geologists. They went up in a helicopter, looked at it, and the next day they abandoned the project and left Jamaica. Because the laws that they were being governed by in the EU would affect them if they got it wrong. Now, who should come in and then complete the road? Chinese. So, and of course, it fell down. I mean, the only benefit of this story is the fact that now they're actually asking me to look at the geology before they build the roads. So maybe there is some benefit there. But I do take a point, different cultures act in different ways. And that is something that, yeah, I don't know. All I know is that it is an indication of metals in. I do know that that plant is sitting in that place. And I don't really understand it being used for aggregate. So you can look at it yourselves and make a choice. That's the way I see it.
Let me say good night here to everybody here. I want to first of all thank the organizers who brought all of us here tonight to discuss such a very important issue that is affecting the lives of all of us here. My name is Charles Williams. I'm a former Kalinago chief. I stand in solidarity with everybody who is, sympathizing with what is happening up in the bush. First of all, let me say, we all need the airport. That is something that we have been after for a long time. But during the UWP administration, they planned that they were going to build the airport, and Edison James was thinking of having a crusher somewhere in the area. And I remember that was headlines during the campaign, and he was challenged on that situation. Today, what I am seeing now is that it should not be built by them, but it should be built by this present administration. And that is what is going on. However, unfortunately, while we need the airport, the bush is not connected to the airport. The bush is connected to the airport because they want the stone there for the surfacing of the airport. And we need that, yes. But there are many areas in Dominica we can find the suitable stones to seal the airport, apart from the bush. And we can see in the presentation tonight, I observe the excavating continues going up the hill and up the hill and up the hill. And why up that hill? When we know when Sintra was doing the road, right at the entrance of the Debush Bridge, you can see the remains of where Sintra took stones there to seal the Hatton Garden Postpuff Road. Now, I think it's unfortunate that this government doesn't respect the national parks and the forest reserves of this country. If I may say, during the radio programs, you heard people like Lloyd Pascal saying that the Prime Minister was involved in exporting 12 of Dominica's parrots, 2 Cicero and 10 Jacos. Now we see what happened in Postpuff at the National Park in Postpuff. They amended the act so that they could build the Kempinski Hotel along there. Now they're looking at the marina, and again, it is affecting the West Coast seas. Now see what is happening in our own community here, in the Kalinago territory, in Atkinson, in Antrizal, in Marigot, in Concord. That is affecting all the people of the eastern part of the island. And I think I heard on the news today that the government is taking steps to mitigate the problem. I wouldn't recommend mitigation for that problem. I want for us to take a decision to stop the excavation that is going on up there. No mitigation. Stop the program. Stop the bloody program. There are other places we can get roads.
Thank you.
Thank you. Professor, we seem to be in facing a dilemma right now. Based on your observations, maybe the minerals in there may not be attractive for mining, economic mining. We know that there are many sites in Dominica where one can establish a quarry.
Yeah.
We know that there are alternative transportation routes by sea or land to access a suitable quarry. However, you pointed out that the material needed to surface the runway must have a special characteristic. The Prime Minister said this afternoon that in his press conference that he was advised that of all the materials looked at so far, this is the area that most suitable. But we also know that of the negative impact that is happening and likely to happen is proceeding. Based on your experience and your qualification, what would you advise the government to do to approach this problem right now, given the alternatives that you have?
Well, I think what is needed is that the aggregates from the different places, those that are active quarries at the present time and those that potentially could become quarries, are basically tested. And that then those results are made publicly available so people can understand that. Because I think without understanding, you can't see why they're doing things. If it turns out they are not suitable, then you've got to look abroad. You've got to look for foreign material to do that. But if you don't do that, you wouldn't be able to build an airport anyway. So I think you've got to approach it by understanding what you need to do. And this should have been all planned beforehand, so that you knew exactly what you were doing. You know, how much quarry material do I need to do the baselines of the runways? How much do I need to put on the top? Do we have that material available? Is it in easy supply? Is it a place which is fair enough to extract from without damaging the ecosystem or the protected areas? I think you've got to balance everything up. And I think it's the balancing that upsets people when it's the wrong balance. And I think that more transparency, explaining what's going on, and providing the information, providing basically the technical information so people can understand it. That I think is needed.
Yeah. My observation is today the Prime Minister made 3 points. The area has the best material for the airport. And when he is through with there, he's going to replant the area with forest. And I don't have I'm not a forester, but I have a little bit of forestry background. And I understand soil a little bit. I'm a farmer by the way, so I deal with soil all the time. And I can tell you the area there in question in Deux is a very, very difficult area. I worked there myself in the 60s, 69, 70. When they did copper mining in Dominica, I worked with them. That was my first job when I left school. And I can tell you the area there is very, very difficult. And to get through to the required material we want for the airport, you have to dig very, very deep. And by just passing on the road, they have just started excavating. So if we need to get the real material, you're talking about maybe 500 feet. And the fact remains, where are you going to dump all that earth you are going to remove on top that material? I am not too scientific, so I don't want to go too much with the doctor way. But in my own simple observation, where are you going to dump all that soil? Already you're dumping it in the Concord Valley. It is creating a problem. People are getting scratch when they go and bathe, etc. And so that's my concern. The other concern I have is if you are going to replant the area after you have excavated the area, when you remove the topsoil, what you're remaining with is with rocks. Are you going to plant forest trees in rocks? I mean, I don't understand that yet. I mean, I am not too intelligent, but I don't understand how you're going to plant forest trees in rocks.
Well, invariably,
so that's my concern about it.
Invariably, when you talk about returning it, it usually doesn't go anywhere near to what it used to be. So in other words, in Jamaica, they mine a lot of bauxite. And they cut the trees out, and it comes back, and it goes down the grassland where they grow cattle. It doesn't go back to forest. And I don't think you would ever be able to put something like that back to forest.
Pleasant evening, Professor. Greetings, Mabrika, to the Kalinago people. Yeah, some concerns. My name is Almario Kazumi. I'm a soil sciences by training. We'll get to that. But the direct question is, based on your observations, and I'm following up on the question that journalist Matt Pellitte has actually posed. Because actually, I was present to hear the Prime Minister articulate that as a very technical and scientific justification for the choosing of the Debois site. Now, obviously, you spoke eloquently with regards to the andesitic rocks, the dacitic rocks, and the basaltic rocks. And you actually did not even highlight with regards to the bulk densities and the differences in bulk densities, which makes these rocks suitable, limiting in terms of their engineering.
You can't do that just looking at the rocks.
Correct.
You need to measure them.
We are hopeful that within your short stay, you will be able to actually get these samples and give us that kind of data required, because these are some voids that we actually have with regards to engineering properties in Dominica. But the point is, on your assessment, what would be the quantum of material would you estimate has been actually excavated in terms of tonnage? We actually have an estimation based on acreage. And in your fair assessment, the potential ecological impacts, especially with regards to the potential land slippage, i.e. based on soil properties that we are hopeful that you yourself will be able to analyze. Based on rainfall patterns in the area and based on the anthropogenic activities that we now see happening, what would be the assessment in terms of modeling? Because that in itself, there is of a bigger and a more concern to me. Having visited the site as recent as Saturday, now everyone has actually highlighted this site with regards to the excavation, but of more concern to me is where they are actually dumping with regards to the acute nature of siltation taking place and sedimentation taking place there. And I think that in itself, there needs to be scrutinized a bit more in detail with regards to the immediate impact being caused. So yes, we appreciate the atrocities with regards to the scarring of the immediate quarrying site, but on scrutinous levels, the dump and especially the sanitation levels needs to be looked at. So it would be humble of me to ask you to even highlight that particular point a bit more for public knowledge and acceptance with regards to the differences in the rock types and why is this of a concern to you? Thank you.
Well, it's very difficult to actually go down a route of that without actual accurate information about what they've actually done. And we can't even get plans of it. So you can't really even tell how much they've extracted. But certainly in terms of where you're going to put waste tips, there's no suitable place there for waste tips. Where they would, a short-term dumping place, the Stonefield, it's not really, it's more or less, exhausted already. So where are you going to dump? I mean, if you're spending a lot of time tracking it somewhere else, just to actually put waste piles, that's a waste of money. I mean, what you needed is a site that actually was a site which is actually suitable for rocks, the actual rock type you require, the aggregates you require, as well as somewhere where you can put grader, because there it's not really a suitable place for grader, and where you can put the waste material, or even store the soils that you can put back afterwards. But none of that is possible in that site. And I don't have data, and I don't think I could get the data at the present point in time to actually understand that. in terms of that. And we don't know how thick the soils are. I mean, you know, if you were extracting that properly, what you would be doing is you'd be drilling to see how thick the soils are in different places. You'll be testing the different rocks in different places to see what the grade of the material is. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you would do if you were going to do that properly. Okay, and that's the way that a quarrying company will go about it. They will be looking at the grade of their material, not the grade of the material they're working at the present point in time, the grade of material they're going to be working next year and the year after, so that they can progressively build it through. And they'd have a plan for, we've got a quarry of this size, this will last 20 years or whatever it happens to be. And at the end of it, we have to rehabilitate it in whatever way. We won't be going back to what it originally was. We have to make sure that the actual, what we're leaving, the faces that we're leaving are protected, are not going to collapse, so that you don't get the landslides. That requires quite a serious thought as you're building it. Particularly if you've got very thick regolith soils on top. So there's a lot of things, but we just don't have data to even think about. I mean, I'm not sure that data has been collected or thought about. I mean, that's where my problem is. To just simply say density, that's not relevant. I mean, the density is not there. I mean, in some places they use limestone on runways. Limestone is much less dense than igneous rocks, but they still use it. So just saying density isn't anything that's useful. So I think there's more that needs to be thought about. This was just simply a brief investigation to look at what the rocks were there. I mean, I'm only here for a few days. Okay, but what you really needed was somebody to go around the whole country and spend a good period of time understanding the quality of the material, because this is a very large construction project, and it should have been looked at properly before. And there should be information that is available. You should be able to get hold of information that tells you all the characteristics of all the rocks. Not just the density, the strength, the polished stone values, the absorbency, all of these things could have been done. But I don't know that they have been done. And certainly, how are you going to do it when you haven't actually started the quarry? How do you test the rock when you haven't actually got down to the rocks you want to extract? I'm not sure that's easy. So I think I just don't think I don't think the right methodology has been used to think about this in the stuff.
Thank you.
Just quickly, if I take this up time and everything else, I just want to say to Simon, thanks a lot for the work you've done. It was a pleasure working with Simon in the field. There were about 4 of us, Walter, Gary, and Mr. Durant. I've never broken so many rocks in my life in a short space of time, but it all worked out. The one key point I want to make about Simon being here is, there is, I think, 1 or 2 geologists in Dominica, but when we were looking for a geologist to come to help us, to give us this sort of information, we wanted to ensure that that geologist was very independent, and we are very happy we found that in Simon. Also to add it to that was his experience, 30 years in the field, and even more so, he's a professor, so we learned a lot looking at the rocks. There was once, he's a bit too honest, and that's really the problem, but because when we saw this fool's gold, we didn't know about fool's gold before, we thought we had found gold, so all of us were ready to start getting our drilling equipment, and he quickly said, no, that's not, it's pyrite, right? Is it? Okay. So that's about it. Thank you, Simon, again, we appreciate it.
Thank you. So we will have our final presenter for the evening, Caridad Estrada. She was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. She earned her bachelor's degree in environmental engineering and her master's degree in material science and environmental engineering at Princeton University, where she is currently pursuing a dual doctorate PhD in civil and environmental engineering and material science. Her research studies how rock, minerals, water, and pollutants interact in the environment and how these interactions affect water quality over time. She uses a combination of lab experiments and computer simulations to understand how changes in minerals can influence what ends up in our water. Her work examines processes directly relevant to mining and other extractive industries, including mineral stability, surface reactivity, contaminant mobility, and long-term environmental persistence. So let's give a round of applause to Karen.
Thank you all. Those are online, that are here. I thank the Kalinago people for welcoming us into their sacred land. And today I'm just going to be talking about mainly the environmental impacts of extraction activities. Whether it is mining, quarrying, or other activities that they may be claiming to use this site for, these impacts are all the same. And most importantly, many of these impacts are categorized into two timelines. So we have short-term impacts versus long-term impacts. Our short-term impacts that we have already started seeing start with the noise and the dust from blasting, drilling, and heavy machinery. We also have water contamination from the sediment or chemical spills in nearby streams. And finally, we also have habitat disturbances. So animals are moving away due to noise and activity. Our longer term impacts that can slowly develop over months, years, decades, or even centuries are often more difficult to reverse, which is one of the conversations we were having leading up to this presentation. One of them being soil loss. So this erosion, removing the topsoil needed for plant growth, or salinization, or the salt buildup in soil from poor drainage, or exposed minerals. Landscape alteration, and finally, species extinction, loss of plants or animals that cannot adapt. One thing I would like to highlight from this is that because these animals are also moving away from this area or losing their habitats, the human health impacts are many that we've already known today, such as Ebola, COVID, SARS. That all comes from animals losing their habitats and encroaching where people are inhabiting. So the closer we have these animals to us, the higher the transmission of diseases. I won't go into that because that's not my expertise, but it is an impact on human health. So what is erosion for those who don't know? The process where soil and rock are worn away by wind, water, or other natural forces, and they're often made worse by extraction activities. And Janelle's earlier presentation, she was talking about how Mother Nature does these things naturally. They do come in pulses over time. Excavation activities further aggravates this, and maybe what we would have seen in perhaps 5 to 10 years, we start seeing rapidly in 1 to 2 years. Wind erosion, because of the loose soil and dust, exposes all the extraction sites are then blown away into communities where people are living, such as the Kalinago territory and even further. This can travel long distances, even onto other sides of the island. We also have gully formations, which are channels carved by running water that can make land unusable for farming or wildlife. At this point, this type of erosion would really make that area unsuitable for any industrial use or agricultural. So that is one thing to keep in mind when we talk about rehabilitation. And then finally, the water erosion that we have from rainwater. Someone had mentioned our patterns of rainwater here in Dominica, washing away a lot of these soils and chemicals into nearby rivers and lakes. So one of the main things I wanted to talk about is soil compaction. So with soil compaction, we have heavy machinery and other types of activities that flow through these roots or even at the extraction site. Because of this, we push out a lot of the air and the soil particles get closer together. Sorry. I care about this issue so much that I'm very emotional right now. Okay, just going to take a quick break and sit down for a second. So she's just asked me to read through the slides. So soil compaction happens when heavy pressure, often from extraction machinery, like haul trucks, bulldozers, and excavators, forces soil particles close together, squeezing out the spaces between them. The impacts are reduced air spaces into the soil, makes it harder for water to soak in, less water reaches aquifers and groundwater, preventing them from being recharged. It limits root growth for planting, for plants, and flood risk increases. So on my right, you have healthy soil. The soil particles are spaced apart, allowing water to move easily down to plant roots. And then here you have compacted soil. The particles are tightly pressed together with fewer spaces between them. So the water is not quite reaching where it should. I'm back. So another point of the soil compaction is that it's affecting sites more than just day wash. That means all the roots that these machinery, these trucks, all the things that we're transporting to the site to do any type of extraction activity is also affecting soil that's coming up to that area. So even when we have to take the rocks out and extract them and move them to other areas, we further compact that soil. And that makes it hard for plants to grow, for roots to take hold. It increases our flood risk, and then also doesn't give us the ability to recharge our natural aquifers and groundwater systems. So further is the water pollution. So with the water pollution, one of the things that our previous presenter had spoken about is that when certain rocks are exposed, and in this case, we have a lot of sulfide minerals, when they're exposed to air and water during extraction, they produce sulfuric acid. This acid leaches toxic metals like lead and arsenic into nearby water sources. One thing to note is that lead and arsenic already naturally exist in many of these minerals in our Earth's crust. However, because we are disturbing the soil, we are extracting rocks, we release more of this contaminant into the water and into the air. Further is the runoff contamination. Once these contaminants that I just spoke about travel beyond the mining site, polluted water can also seep into the groundwater, leach into different surface water systems that we have a lot further than just in this area. We're talking about to the other side of the island, because relatively when we look at water systems, and they're all interconnected, the distance of Dominica for these contaminants to travel is very small. To us, it seem big. It will take us maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours to drive from one side to the other. But for these particles, that's just nothing. Given with how much rainwater, how much humidity is in this island, you're able to have these travel long distances. And then we have our air pollution. So if we were to blast it into smithereens, quote unquote, that would create a lot of particulate matter. So particulate matter is actually a measured pollutant by the World Health Organization, by governments across the globe, and ones that should be monitored here in Dominica. Particulate matter is created by a lot of this dust, but it is also created from blasting the rocks themselves. Now, particulate matter can have two main sizes. These are just big enough to get lodged into your lungs and affect your respiratory systems. This happens at every stage, from exploration to the actual operation of this site. So it's happening now. It's only going to get worse. Diesel exhaust emissions, so all the trucks that we've been seeing, I guess it was like 15 an hour. All of them have carbon emissions. They all have nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxides. People are breathing that in. The other day we were driving behind one of them. We had to put the windows up because it's so dense. This air that's full of these particulate matters and heavy gases. And then finally, we have the greenhouse and toxic gases that are also released, such as methane, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. And these are the ones that actually contribute to climate change, the ones that we're trying to prevent to happen, warming our globes, and so on and so forth. So we are just now at my last slide. One of the things an environmental engineer is supposed to do, a good one, in these sites, is actually do some of these calculations for the environmental impact assessments. This is something that we learn in our field. It's something that we should know how to do with water quality data reports, with sampling at different places of the site to see what is actually on there. And an environmental assessment would be able to look at all of these issues. Of course, I don't have that data. It's not publicly available. So what you see here are my first order estimates of human health impact. First order basically means I did the least amount of assumptions to be the most accurate to what could actually happen at this site. These are all based on the World Health Organization and the EPA's dose response relationships. And one thing to note is that what I use for these calculations are things that we know are found in any natural system. So I have for here the particulate matter, which is road dust, diesel traffic, etc. I have lead contamination that comes from the minerals, and also arsenic. The levels that I calculated this with is only with a slight aggravation to what is normal or natural in that site. So here, for diesel or traffic and road dust, I calculated 1 to 5 micrograms per meter. That is enough added air pollution to shorten lives by weeks to months per person, adding up to hundreds of years of life across the community, because we have about 1,000 people or more that are right around the perimeter of this site. Further, the dust and soil contamination, or the lead, my calculations here for the increase of lead in children. The reason I use children is because children are more sensitive to lead contamination. Even small increases in lead, and we're talking at the microgram level, can lower children's learning ability and capacity. We're talking about IQ levels because of lead contamination. This is equivalent to dozens to hundreds of IQ points lost across local children. And on my last one, I have the arsenic. Like I said, comes from the same rocks and minerals that we're exposing to air and water or we're destroying. When they seep into our drinking water, into our surface systems, rivers, lakes, groundwater, this estimate that I have here increases the lifetime cancer risk and long-term health problems, even at levels near international drinking water standards. To the next slide. One thing I really want to highlight here is that everything I calculated is well within the guidelines of the World Health Organization, at minimum aggravation of this site for an island such as Dominica that is so dense in some of these minerals. Even though the pollution levels might be considered acceptable or legal, they can cause serious harm. The international guidelines are not safety thresholds, it should be the minimum. We should strive to do better with our levels. And when you have extraction activities such as these, you inevitably are increasing the levels of these very basic contaminants. We have not sampled the site, so there could be more in that site, such as mercury, such as microplastics, forever chemicals. There could be more that enhance some of these contaminants being more harmful to human beings. Why this matters? Well, air pollution, water contaminants, they are all extremely dangerous, even at low concentrations, because of the time of exposure. The bottom line is that if we want to keep the health of our people here in Dominica, we must put a stop to these type of extraction activities that have not done a proper environmental impact assessment. If they were to do these calculations, they would soon see that it could not be approved. And that's
Thank you so very much. That was an excellent presentation. So we will open up for a very brief question and answer. It is getting late, but I know we all have things to say. And so raise your hand, I will come to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I came here tonight when I heard the announcement of this event, and it was my intention to come here to learn, so I would sit quietly and listen and learn. But I have learned too much already today. There is more than a university degree to have learned so much that we have done tonight, and I am tempted to say something. My name is Lloyd Pascal. Some of you know me. From what we have heard tonight, it is clear that the promises that we have heard on radio, on press conferences, that there will be a temporary halt and that there will be mitigation and there will be back to normal and we will continue our project because we must finish that airport in time. I'm here to say that I hope the Kalinabo chief left already. Sorry. I hope the people of the Kalinago Council, the Kalinago chief is paying attention because we will need a lot more effort than just listening to that. We have to stop this operation and we need the government of the Kalinago Council to start proceedings to stop at the court level. We are a country that obtained independence in 1978 and we got a constitution of a republic with a president. And we have operated this republic without an ombudsman for 47 years. It's okay. We are in a situation now where we have a situation of parliament without the leader of the opposition. And it's okay. But this project, this international project is the one that is going to lift up the spirit and the fire in all of us. The country is destroyed already. The country is destroying too rapidly. And it is left to us now. The consciousness, I mean, I could have been at home. My wife just called me there and she told me, I'm alone. Are you still in the meeting? But the thing is, here we are. We will hear more lectures because they are very informative and very educational, but we must leave here with a decision. We are all lawyers. We need lawyers. We need a lot of professional witnesses to go in court. People who can stand up on their 2 feet and talk about environmental impact assessment. Because we have never had an environmental impact assessment in Dominica. Based on what we have learned here tonight. They are lying to us. And if we have to depend on the engineer that is representing the government, the controllers, all the other companies there, we are going to fall in a precipice and we will be lost forever if we depend on this government And this engineer that they are walking around presenting. So my people, I don't want to speak louder. I want the Carib Council to be committed tonight that they are going to lead that struggle in court, to take court action to stop the government. Nobody is going to plead to the government to stop. They will not stop. But we want them to stop. I mean, we just passed a while ago and we saw, look at where they are depositing debris in mining thing, they call it trimmings. And when you dig rock and so on, you have to put something aside because you're looking for good material. They are taking mud and clay and so on and dumping it right on the roadside next to the river. We just saw that a while ago. Can we continue to allow that to happen? They are not even finished excavating and digging the mountain that they have to do. They will put all of it by the river, by the roadside. My ladies and gentlemen, I am not here to speak. I was not invited to speak. I was here to listen. And I just want to make one plea. Let us put a governing council, a governing committee, a management team together so that we can take court action. That is the only way. The government of Dominica has violated every law. They violated the National Parks and Protected Areas Act. They violated the Planning Act. They violated the Forestry Act. Are we going to sit there and beg them after they have broken so many laws of our country, beg them to stop? Oh, please stop the little project in India. Since they have violated so many laws, we are going to have to go to court with them and ask them, let the judge tell them to stop it and stop it now.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to respond quickly to what Mr. Pastor asked. Our approach is three-pronged. It's educational, it's outreach, and it's also legal. So there are things that are happening behind the scene right now that in terms of the legal approach, and hopefully in the very short term we will be able to get some results. Okay.
Thank you.
Hello. So earlier I didn't introduce myself. I'm Amy Laron and my fam, well, Amy Laron Kazimi. My bad. That's kind of new. So Amy Laron Kazimi. So this is a particular. It's particularly sad for me because my family owns the land, a lot of the land in that Corona, in that Concord Valley. I grew up across the river with my auntie and them there, and I learned to swim in Basemajo. All my kids have jumped off that big stone, climbed up. All my kids are American and they love that big stone. So it has a lot of sentimental ties. But there's a couple things I wanted to ask that is not sentimental because we have to move past this sentiment into some action. And one of the things I want to ask our lovely presenter over here, whose name I didn't catch, unfortunately, Carrie.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Miss Carrie, is what do you think it would cost? Because we heard our esteemed leader speaking about recovery. So I want to ask you, from your professional and expert position, what do you think the cost would be for human rehabilitation, human systems rehabilitation, as well as environmental rehabilitation, if we were, as a people, to decide that we're going to let this happen because so be it, and why not, once again, and it have gold under there, and hello, what is one more river when we have 365 wells? Just give us a little estimate there so that we can take that to the government when they start talking about how it's not a big deal, we can just grow some more trees. I want you to talk to that a little bit. And then the other thing I want to ask, and this is for the group that organized this, is that we're talking about we are doing this, and Mr. Brisbane, saying a lot of we's. But I really want to identify, I want us all in this forum to identify who the we's are so that we can lock the we's in together and create one massive we and I, so we can take back our country, because now it's time for us to do that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Carrie.
Yes, so this is a really good question. I spent 3 years doing research with the US Department of Energy for their environmental remediation branch. So we specifically were doing projects that are remediating some of the projects or some of the developments that the Department of Energy had from the 1950s that we still haven't fully remediated. So when we talk about estimates and costs, one thing is that this particular project I was working on was for mercury contamination of the soil bank in the creeks in Tennessee from nuclear weapons developments because they were improperly discharging it into their creek there. To this day, we have been trying to remediate that area and we haven't been able to, and it has been millions of dollars. And still, we have not rehabilitated that area. They have even excavated parts of the topsoil, and the mercury contamination is now so deep that it continues recontaminating the water that flows or interacts with that soil. One of the things that is very important in the environmental impact assessment is really seeing what contaminants already exist in this area. Because when you have co-mingling contaminants, you also start changing the species of each one. When you have things like organic matter in your creek, carbon, nitrogen, plant debris, these things that are dissolved into the surface water, it has been proven that they can change the species of some of these heavy metals. They, for example, with mercury, it makes it into methyl mercury, which is the one we don't like. It bioaccumulates in your bodies and animals. It impacts people for generations. So this is why an impact assessment is so important. On the order of magnitude or price for how much an environmental impact could be, let's say on the higher end, thousands of dollars, versus not really looking at what already exists and then trying to rehabilitate an unknown would be millions of dollars. For example, when you take samples from an already contaminated site and you don't know what is in that sample versus when you do, running that sample alone already costs 10 times more than it would have if you don't know what the elements are in it. Because now we have to characterize the sample, we have to guess using all of this great technology that we have developed. It still costs money. So it's very important to be thorough, or else it could cost so much that you would also be remediating a site maybe 50 to 100 years later and still have the same issue. It's important to quantify rehabilitation and what will be rehabilitated. And if you do things in a safe manner, you can make plans for these things. If it's approved to begin with. Approval would come if it can be weighed. The cost of the environmental impact can be weighed against what is being extracted. And from what I've heard today, for example, it seems like they already did that in the 60s and they decided that the cost was too high. If anything, the environment would have gotten worse. I don't think better to do this type of activity in that area.
Thank you.
Just briefly, we already know what will happen in that area. In the 1950s, late 50s, when they were building that road, some of you may be old enough to remember. You remember how long it took that hill to stabilize? We took to calling that area the slips, because every day with the rainfall of the area, there were landslides for years before the road settled down enough to be surfaced and it became a usable highway to the north. So it's not as if we don't know. I mean, Almario, Lloyd, and others, we have professionals in the society who can describe to us in great detail the nature of the land, the nature of the trees, the nature of the environment, and what will happen if you gouge it. Okay, so that's number one. And so these are some of our expert witnesses that are here in Dominica, and along with people like Simon and so on can be called in to go forward. The other observation is this. In the 1990s, when BHP came to Dominica at the request of the government of the day to explore the possibility of mining that area for copper, we said no. We at that time was the Dominica Conservation Association. We said no. And we researched it, and we got in touch with a colleague organization in Australia, which is the home base for that company. And they gave us information on what that company had just done in another country, Papua New Guinea, with a copper mine. Destroyed a huge area, many, many times the size of Dominica. But what got us, and it comes to the point that some of you have asked, is that BHP knew there was copper, but the copper was so far down. In fact, he said the minimum depth at which you would find a usable copper is 1,000 feet, but most of the copper is between 3,000 and 4,000 feet, which means they would have to dig a huge hole into which you could pour, literally pour a city before they would get to commercially viable copper. And that is what we were able to use against BHP in Australia to get them to stop, to get them not to start, because it's always more difficult to get a company to stop after they have started. But the fact is, what would be required to get commercial copper out of that hillside from what BHP told us is an operation that would clear 4 square miles of land, which is the size of the city of Roseau, and go down 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 feet. The place would be, not only would the rivers on this side be lost, but the rivers on the west side that draw water from that catchment would also be lost. And Dominica would cease to exist for all intents and purposes. I take Lord's point, and I do believe we have enough information that we can file an action in the court. For example, this is a project that requires an ESIA. Let's never forget, the only reason that they're looking for material in the Debauche area is because there's a project called an international airport project which requires material. If you didn't have that project, they wouldn't have to bother looking for raw material. So these two project sites are linked. In fact, the footprint of the international airport project has now got as far as Debauche. So when you are assessing the international airport, you have to assess its impact against not just the site in Westmead, but wherever it is they have to go to get anything to bring to the site. So which means Debauche. So it's clear to me their failure to do an ESIA, not only for Debauche, but you would be, some of you might be surprised to know, they do not have an approved ESIA for the international airport. Okay? So it means that the source project needs to be taken to court, not just the government, all the officials, the manager, the experts in the government that are saying, go ahead, let's take them to the court. So let's start making individuals who are advising, go ahead, let's sue them in the court. Let's make them pay along with the government. And there is an international court that we can go to get environmental convictions against the government. The International Court of Justice will hear a case against the government that has violated known environmental procedures and laws. So yes, we can start as soon as we have enough brave people assembled to go forward.
Thank you very much. And we will just hear from one other individual before we do a presentation and a cultural performance. Carla.
Thank you so much, everybody, for those presentations. I have a few things I wanted to mention, because obviously I'm not the only emotional one here tonight, but so much. So just congratulations on the organizers and the community, obviously. This is really such a beautiful space. Everybody in Dominica should know about the space. So let's spread the word. I just made a few notes, and I tried to be very quick. It's been a long night. And what I've heard this evening, that the proper process of environmental and social impact assessments and permissions have not been done. Arthi just expressed this again. It's typical. Let's take it even further. What I haven't really heard mentioned is what about the coastal degradation? What happens when all this silt goes out even into the oceans? And this is going to hit us all the way from Batibu, maybe even Portsmouth, all the way down the coast, because we see already what the sargassum seaweed does to the coast. So what's going to happen there? We haven't even asked that. Yeah. Yes, and our dive sites. So all of these people that are coming in on the international airport to go to dive in Dominica, one of the top 10 dive destinations in the world, what's going to happen to that? But this is not the only project, and this is not the only time it's happened. Again, as I was making my notes, Arthi mentioned about it, and with the copper mining. And I remember that we were sitting with our executive of SHAPE, that's almost 30 years ago, and the DCA, Arthi was the president of DCA, Dominica Conservation Association at the time, sitting, and how are we going to approach the government to, you know, deal with this threat of the copper mining. We went through that. We went through all the issues with the government siding with Japan to expand whaling. And I've lived to see, now we have a whale sanctuary. There was a minister called my brother, crazy fella, what he's talking about whale watching. And here we are. So maybe if we can think about the lessons of the past, and maybe we can look forward to what can be learned. As I was going to say, Arthi started off with a few things which really made me think and look back into archives on my phone. And he asked us about a point he made about this is the Garden of Eden, this common prayer, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, and I will have a point here. He asked us to be curious and to ask why. And so my question is why? Why is it that we as Dominicans cannot all help each other to listen, to be open, and to all ask why and how? How do we get about that? This shouldn't be a political issue. I don't like to get into politics. I like to get into nationhood. And it should be about nurturing, all of us Dominicans, nurturing a sense of respect, right? A respect not only for each other, but a respect for Dominica, a respect for our nation and for our island. And in my archives, I brought this up, and I would like to close my comments with this short poem that I actually wrote in 1996 about the copper mining issue. And I performed it at Caravana with Tim and Jessica many years ago there. And I'll just close with this. And I am speaking for Dominica. And I'm asking us to feel close to Dominica as we hear her speak. I'll try to do it justice. Who dare prod me? I gave myself, nurturing you and those before. Now I stand Still, when weapons come against me, my soul, my hidden treasures, must I be perpetually violated? My verdant trench coat, scorched by sun and hands and man and now Chinese machines? No parts of me will feel, no more dew will moisten my skin. My rivulets of clear gold and parched will be parched, their beds cracked. Who will hear the midnight murmurs of my forest creatures? The noonday novenas of my children and their mothers? Who will irrigate their dreams? In resignation, I sigh for them. I do not hear their voices, cannot see their actions, because now no one holds me close. No one holds me close to their conscience. No one holds me close to the real vision. Who will hold me close? For Dominica. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, everybody. We will now be revealing a beautiful art piece that has been done specifically for this event.
Okay, once again, just 10 more minutes, not too much longer. Okay, we are into the celebration. We said education and celebration, a lot of education, but no, we want to, it's a celebration, if you allow us. So this art was done, this banner was done as a theme banner for what the mission we're on. It was done by Lowell Roy, so we will unveil it, and he is providing us with an interpretation of his art. Okay?
Laura Omni Royer and Shade Royer. A raised fist shines brightly like the sun, holding true the power of the people who fight to protect the nature island of the world. Within it, the spirit of our Kalinago ancestors weep, forming the Pagua River as it snakes its way through the heart of Waitikupuli. Beneath a sperm whale which flows from the Kalinago's hair are maroons and other Dominican people march towards a proud Cicero standing firm within a battered but unwavering flag. It shall not be moved as the Malafini phoenix rises from behind. The artist stated, I fully enjoyed working on this painting, and it was only possible to reach this level in such a short space of time because my daughter Shade did most of the center of the flag, including the Cicero. It was the second time we had painted together after many years, and I'm extremely honored to have created it with her help, our Kalinago people, our wildlife, and the rest of Dominica in general. Let's give it a round of applause.
So I want to say a big thank you to Lowell. I worked with him very closely in terms of trying to get this done in time. In fact, this was only finished today. And it took about 2 days to do it. And for that art, it's a very short time. In fact, when I saw him today, he said the only thing he wanted to do was just go and sleep because he had worked for that length of time. So we will use this as our theme banner as we move around into different activities and everything else. Yeah. Now we're on to the last activity or the last bit of celebration, and it's a surprise. We have saved the best for last. And now we want to do something special, and it's Mr. Atherton Afimate. And so tonight we have decided that we are going to present Arthur with an award on behalf of the tremendous work that he has done for this country over his years. And so we have, I think it's the most environmentally friendly award or plaque or whatever it is that we're going to present to you. And yes, I will, it's going to be presented to you by Janelle and Degari. And in a sense, it is the passing of the torch from you to them, or from them to you. Just to explain it or to give the interpretation, it's nature's act, but I did a little extra to just add to it. Basically, it's a piece of driftwood, and the driftwood has two veins. After I'm trying to explain to you, it's the Dave Wash River. There's a rock which is the Dave Wash Hill, yeah, and that rock has several colors in it, which represents the minerals, everything in the soil. It has green, red. It's not able to be seen because of the light. There's a parrot which is on top of close to the rock, which again, the parrot signifies your voice, your strength, everything. Actually, too, with the piece of driftwood, there is an eye and a mouth which looks like a whale. So it's so many animals, and that then the whale, part of that dwarfs into a snake, which wraps around Dave Wash. And you could interpret so many different things. It represents your strength, your stamina, your voice, your everything else. Yeah. So I am kind of rushing through this. I had plans to explain it a little better, but because of time and everybody wanting to leave, the plaque, what does it say, Janelle or Gary, you can read for me? Take the mic. Oh.
Yeah, so the plaque says, we present this award to Atherton Afimate, environmentalists, for lifelong dedication to safeguarding Dominica's environment and preserving our heritage through environmental justice.
Yeah, before we present, I just want to thank you very much for your work. I'm not sure you've ever been presented with anything in Dominica. I know in other areas, but at least we have done something, and we appreciate your effort and everything, okay? So the two younger people will now pass. Okay, so let's have an explosion of
Thank you so much. And look, we started with blessings and we're ending with blessings. And so as Mother Nature blesses us, we're going to hear some amazing steel pan and experience the Karina Cultural Group. I'm sorry, it's not the Karina Cultural Group, it's the Y2 Cirque. And so we look forward to experiencing the Y2 Cirque performance. Thank you.
Wait, Rhonda, like, I was Hi. Oh, thank you. I already see what I've been doing. Okay. Yeah. And I was like, not like I want to be able to bring it back here. I just want to know. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Reach out. Yeah. You know, I really want to so I come back. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you just have to jump start. So it's up to you. I just let you know that you're going to start. Somebody jump start me and waiting for me to you can come now. Yes.
Okay, well, I'll have to.